Alright, hello everybody, welcome to our second lesson here, Success and Struggles 1921 to 1937. Excuse me. So our objectives and standards are to understand the advancements made by women in different areas from 1921 to 1937, and to analyze the difficulties and struggles women faced. Can you take a moment there to read the standards, please? And our desired result, what success and struggles did women face from 1921 to 1937? Some vocabulary here. The Shepard-Towner Maternity Act supported mothers and children with programs such as child care. The Cable Act removed discrimination against women and allowed the wives of foreigners to keep their citizenship. And the National League of Women Voters, or NLWV, an organization that worked to promote rights in government and politics. So education, equal rights. All girls had a chance at a basic education by the 1920s. Some girls from wealthy families were able to attend private schools, and many young women also attended colleges or universities. Women also began to push for more equal rights on the political front, such as prior to gaining the right to vote. In 1920, women formed the National League of Women Voters, or the NLWV, and they looked to expand the rights and roles of women in politics and government. So growing rights. During the 1920s, the NLWV pushed for government acts to increase the rights of women. In 1921, we already discussed this a little bit this week, the Shepard-Towner Maternity Act supported mothers and children with programs such as child care for working mothers or mothers at home. In 1922, we have the Cable Act, which removed discrimination against women, such as in government and things like that, and allowed the wives of foreigners to keep their citizenship. Now, Alice Paul, again another leading figure of women's rights, proposed the Equal Rights Amendment, or the ERA, that allowed for the equal treatment of men and women across different areas. Now, it was proposed in 1923, but rejected by the U.S. Congress, and over time, the ERA has come up for passage and for a vote in Congress, but it has still been rejected over time. A growing role. There were also women who worked to create world peace following World War I, such as in 1921 we have Caroline Rounce Babcock and Eleanor Burns founded the Women's Peace Union, or the WPU. Its goal was to put pressure on the government to outlaw war entirely. Remember, a lot of memories and tough memories of World War I, so people are going to look for ways to not have another world war. They held public meetings and they wrote letters to advance their agenda. And one of the big things that they did was in 1928, the WPU was successful at getting the Kellogg-Briand Pact signed. And the Kellogg-Briand Pact said this, that 26 nations, including the United States, agreed to renounce war as a means of advancing national ambitions, such as their goals and things like that, or solving international conflicts. So, basically outlawing war. Unfortunately, it's a good idea, but it's not going to really do much. It doesn't have a lot of enforcement behind it. So, unfortunately, we still have war today. So, growth in government. Talk about a couple of leading women here. Following the right to vote, women began to enter the world of politics. One of these was, in 1925, up here, I'm circling here for you, top corner, Nellie Davis Tallow Ross became the first woman to serve as governor after the death of her husband in Wyoming. She did run for governor on her own in 1926, but lost. However, President Franklin D. Roosevelt appointed her as the first female director of the U.S. Mint. The U.S. Mint is what produces all our coins and money. So she became the first female director of that in 1933, and she held that position until her retirement in 1953. Miriam Wallace Ferguson, down here in the bottom right here, in the corner down here, she successfully ran for governor of Texas after her husband lost his position because of improper conduct. So she kind of becomes the first female elected governor. Hattie Orfello Wyatt Caraway, up here in the top right corner, was appointed and took her husband's position, as U.S. Senator from Arkansas in 1931 after his death. She then ran on her own in 1932 and became the first female elected U.S. Senator and held that position until 1945, so again up here in the top right-hand corner. And then the first female cabinet member for the president was Frances Perkins, and she was appointed as Secretary of Labor by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and she ran that department from 1933 to 1945. There are other advancements as well. In other areas and subjects, female scientists made advancements in the fields of physics, medicine, and other areas. In the area of anthropology is kind of the study of culture and society and different groups. This woman here, Margaret Mead, studied groups in the South Pacific and made advancements in understanding the development of human beings. There was also a growth in the study of women's history. In 1926, a group of scholars met in Berkshire, Massachusetts, and held the Berkshire Conference on Women in History. Research and discussions helped improve the study of women and finding a women's history, and to this day, they still have the Berkshire Conference on Women in History, and it still plays a major part of society today. So the spread of culture. African Americans were key in producing talented and popular works of literature, art, and music during the 1920s and 1930s. And you may have heard of this, but it becomes known as the Harlem Renaissance. It also allowed for people to push for advancement in civil rights, such as Langston Hughes writing some of his poetry and stories, pushed for equal rights, and music also as well is going to push for equal rights, as well as some political people as well will push for equal rights. The music of gospel singers, typically by African American church choirs, also became popular during the 1930s. Native Americans will see a rise in their interest in their culture as well, We'll also see some Hispanic and Jewish individuals experience a growth in interest in their heritage and culture as well. Now, there will be some struggles by other groups. Life was tough for many women during the 1920s and 1930s, especially with the Great Depression, but women of minority groups faced even harder difficulties than, say, white women. African American, Hispanic, and Jewish women were facing unfair treatment and discrimination, and typically segregated against African American women received unfair treatment by white employers. Now, some African Americans, including women, faced discrimination and violence while trying to vote as well. There were those who fought for equal rights and treatment, though, such as Mary McLeod Bethune. Her picture is right there for you. She worked tirelessly for the rights of African Americans, especially women and girls. She had established a school for girls in 1904 in Daytona Beach, Florida, that helped raise the standards for African American girls, and she also worked to advance living conditions and communities of African Americans. Mary McLeod Bethune will actually serve in President Roosevelt's administration from 1936 to 1945, working to advance the rights of African Americans as well. Alright, so your closure for today. What success and struggles did women face from 1921 to 1937? Alright, have a great rest of your day or night, and I'll talk to you soon.